The billionaire warned her not to fall in love, but he was disarmed when she said his name. She knew she didn't belong there, but she walked in anyway. Maya Sinclair adjusted the strap of her leather portfolio as she stepped through the mahogany doors of the historic Mercer mansion. The scent of old roses and polished wood filled her nostrils, while the soft murmur of elegant conversations created a symphony she'd never been part of. Chandeliers cast golden light across faces that belonged on magazine covers, and every woman seemed to glide rather than walk. At 29, Maya had spent most of her life behind a computer screen, crafting visual stories for clients who rarely remembered her name. Tonight was different. Tonight she was here to oversee the graphic displays for Savannah's most exclusive charity gala, a job that paid more than her usual 3 months combined. She pulled her phone from her clutch, checking the event layout one more time. Table arrangements, sponsor banners, welcome signage, everything had to be perfect. Her reputation as a freelance designer depended on moments like these. The displays look incredible. The voice came from behind her, deep and measured. Maya turned, expecting to see one of the event coordinators, but instead found herself looking into eyes the color of storm clouds. The man stood with the kind of stillness that suggested he was used to being watched, studied, analyzed. "Thank you," she managed, trying to place him. Expensive suit, perfectly styled dark hair with just enough silver at the temples to suggest wisdom rather than age. "You are?" "Someone who appreciates good work." He stepped closer, and she caught the subtle scent of cedar and something indefinably masculine. "You're Maya Sinclair." It wasn't a question. She nodded, surprised he knew her name. "I'm Darius Blackstone." The name hit her like recognition she couldn't quite place. She'd heard it whispered in the coffee shops downtown, seen it in the business section of the Savannah Morning News. Real estate empire, tech investments, the kind of money that moved quietly but powerfully through the city. "Mr. Blackstone." She extended her hand, and when he took it, the contact lasted just a moment longer than professional courtesy required. "Your portfolio speaks for itself," he said, releasing her hand slowly. "Clean lines, emotional resonance. You understand that design isn't just about aesthetics. It's about feeling." Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. In 5 years of freelancing, no client had ever dissected her work with such precision. "That's exactly what I try to achieve." The gala swirled around them. Laughter, clinking glasses, the soft rustle of designer dresses. But something about Darius Blackstone created a bubble of intimate quiet wherever he stood. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. They moved through the crowd toward the French doors leading to the mansion's famous garden terrace. Spanish moss draped from ancient oak trees like nature's own chandeliers, and the warm, August air carried the perfume of magnolia blossoms. Maya leaned against the wrought iron railing, suddenly aware of how the moonlight caught the burgundy highlights in her hair, how her simple black dress seemed almost defiant among all the elaborate gowns inside. "You're not from here," Darius observed, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Chicago, originally. Moved here 3 years ago." She glanced at him sideways. "What gave me away? The way you watch everything like you're trying to decode it. Savannah natives take the magic for granted. And you?" "Chicago-born. Savannah-made." His smile was slight but genuine. 10 years ago, I thought this place would be a temporary stop. Turns out some cities choose you, rather than the other way around." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled with the distant sound of jazz music floating from the ballroom and the gentle whisper of Spanish moss moving in the breeze. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made her turn to face him fully. "Maya." The way he said her name felt like a caress. "I need to tell you something." She waited, struck by the sudden intensity in his expression. "Don't fall in love with me." The words hung in the humid air between them. Not quite a warning, not quite a plea. Maya studied his face, the sharp jawline, the way his eyes seemed to hold secrets, the careful control in every line of his posture. Instead of stepping back, instead of asking why or laughing it off, she did something that surprised them both. She smiled, not the polite, professional smile she wore for clients, but something softer, more knowing, as if she'd just been handed a puzzle piece that finally made sense of a picture she'd been trying to understand. "Okay," she said simply. Darius blinked, clearly expecting a different response. "Okay, I heard you." Maya touched his arm briefly, feeling the tension in his muscles. "But I make my own choices about my heart, Mr. Blackstone." She turned to go back inside, pausing at the threshold to look back at him one more time. He stood silhouetted against the garden lights, a figure carved from shadows and starlight. And in that moment, Maya Sinclair realized she might have just accepted the most dangerous challenge of her life. 3 days later, Maya discovered that Savannah was smaller than she thought. She pushed through the heavy glass door of the book lady on Bull Street, seeking refuge from both the sweltering afternoon heat and her restless thoughts. The independent bookstore had become her sanctuary since moving to the city, a place where time moved slower and inspiration came easier. The familiar scent of old paper and freshly brewed coffee enveloped her as she made her way toward the poetry section. She'd been struggling with a logo design for a local bakery, something that needed to capture both tradition and innovation, and sometimes the answer came from unexpected places. Maya ran her finger along the spines of collected works, pulling out a volume of Robert Frost when a voice behind her made her freeze. "I wouldn't have pegged you for poetry." She turned slowly, already knowing whose storm-gray eyes would be watching her. Darius Blackstone stood 3 feet away, holding a worn copy of On the Road, looking far more approachable in dark jeans and a simple white button-down than he had in his tailored tuxedo. "And I wouldn't have pegged you for Kerouac," she replied, surprised by how natural her voice sounded despite the sudden acceleration of her heartbeat. "Touché." His smile reached his eyes this time. "Though I suppose we both just proved that assumptions are dangerous things." Maya closed the poetry book but didn't put it back. "Are you following me, Mr. Blackstone?" "Darius," he corrected. "And no, though I'm starting to wonder if Savannah has shrunk overnight." He gestured toward the coffee bar in the corner. "Can I buy you a cup?" As an apology for whatever cosmic force keeps putting us in the same places. She should say no. Everything about him screamed complications she didn't need in her carefully ordered life. But there was something in the way he stood. Not the commanding presence from the gala, but something more uncertain, more human. "Just coffee," she said finally. They found a small table by the window overlooking the tree-lined street. Darius ordered black coffee. Maya chose chai tea with extra cinnamon. Simple choices that somehow felt revealing. "So," Maya began, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic mug, "what does a real estate mogul read for pleasure?" "Who says it's for pleasure?" He opened On the Road to a dog-eared page. "Sometimes I read to remember what it felt like to want something other than success." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. "And what did you want?" "Freedom. Adventure. The road less traveled." He looked out the window where tourists were taking photos in front of the fountain across the street. "Turns out the road less traveled sometimes leads you right back to where you started, just with better suits and bigger problems." Maya studied his profile, the slight tension around his eyes, the way his fingers drummed silently against the table. "You say that like success is a punishment. Isn't it sometimes?" Darius met her gaze. "When you build walls so high to protect what you've earned that you forget there's a world outside them, then why build them in the first place?" The question hung between them for a moment. A couple at the next table laughed over shared dessert, and somewhere in the store a child was pleading with their parent for just one more book. "Because," Darius said quietly, "some of us learned early that caring too much about anything, or anyone, gives the world permission to take it away." Maya felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that went deeper than attraction. She'd spent her own life in the safe spaces, behind computer screens, in the margins of other people's important moments, never quite stepping into the center of her own story. "That's a lonely way to live," she said. "Safe, though. Safe is overrated." This time his smile was different, not the polite social expression or even the genuine warmth from before, but something that looked almost like relief. "Maya Sinclair," he said, and she loved the way her name sounded in his voice. "You might be dangerous." "Me?" She laughed, gesturing to her simple sundress and worn leather sandals. "I design wedding invitations and promotional flyers. I'm the opposite of dangerous." "That's exactly what makes you dangerous." Darius leaned forward slightly. "You make ordinary things beautiful. You find poetry in the practical, and you look at me like I'm just a person instead of a portfolio." Before Maya could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from her client about the bakery logo. Reality intruded with its demands and deadlines, and she reluctantly checked the message. "Work?" Darius asked. "Always." She slipped the phone back into her purse. "Small business owner problems. The hustle never really stops." "What if it could?" The question was asked so casually that it took her a moment to register its weight. "What do you mean?" Darius stood, leaving money on the table for both their drinks. "Nothing. Just wondering what you'd do with unlimited time and resources." Create something beautiful, she answered without hesitation. Something that mattered. He nodded as if she'd confirmed something he already knew. Maya? She looked up at him. This man who had warned her not to fall in love with him just 3 days ago, and was now looking at her like she might be the answer to a question he'd forgotten he was asking. I'll see you tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., Bonaventure Cemetery. It wasn't an invitation. It wasn't quite a statement either. Maya felt that same dangerous smile tugging at her lips. That sounds like a challenge, Darius Blackstone. Maybe it is. And as she watched him walk away, Maya realized she was already planning what she'd wear for their dawn encounter. Maya's alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., but she'd been awake for 20 minutes already. She'd spent half the night questioning her sanity. Meeting a virtual stranger at a cemetery at dawn wasn't exactly in her playbook of reasonable decisions. But something about Darius Blackstone had bypassed every logical circuit in her brain and gone straight to a part of her that had been dormant for years. The morning air was thick with humidity and the promise of another scorching August day as Maya parked her Honda Civic outside Bonaventure Cemetery. Spanish moss hung like ghostly curtains from the ancient oaks, and the first hints of sunrise painted the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. She found him at the entrance, wearing running gear and stretching against one of the wrought iron gates. Even in athletic shorts and a faded Georgia Bulldogs t-shirt, Darius carried himself with that same careful control she'd noticed before. "You came," he said, and she caught something like surprise in his voice. "Did you think I wouldn't? I hoped you would. There's a difference." He finished his stretching routine and gestured toward the winding paths ahead. "Ready?" Maya had expected many things, but not a pre-dawn jog through one of Savannah's most famous cemeteries. She fell into step beside him as they began a slow pace along the oak-lined avenues, their footsteps muffled by centuries of fallen leaves. "This is your morning routine?" she asked, already feeling the muggy air stick to her skin. "3 times a week," Darius replied, his breathing steady despite their pace. "Started about 2 years ago when I realized I was spending 16 hours a day in boardrooms and forgetting what fresh air felt like." They jogged past elaborate Victorian monuments and simple stone markers, the cemetery slowly coming alive with the sounds of waking birds and the distant hum of early morning traffic on Victory Drive. "Why here, though?" Maya gestured toward the ornate sculptures surrounding them. "Most people prefer parks for their existential crisis workouts." Darius slowed to a walk near the famous statue of Little Gracie, the 6-year-old girl whose monument had become one of Savannah's most visited graves. "Because the dead don't judge your choices," he said simply, "and they remind you that time isn't unlimited." Maya stopped completely, struck by the raw honesty in his voice. In the growing dawn light, she could see the lines of fatigue around his eyes, the weight he carried in the set of his shoulders. "What happened to you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Darius turned to face her fully, and for a moment, she thought he might deflect with humor or change the subject entirely. Instead, he sat down on a weathered stone bench beneath a massive oak tree. "My younger brother died when I was 25, he said quietly. "Car accident." He was 22, just graduated from college, had this ridiculous plan to backpack through Europe with his girlfriend before starting his first real job. Maya felt her heart constrict. She sat beside him, close enough to offer comfort, but not so close as to intrude. "Tyler was everything I wasn't," Darius continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Spontaneous, trusting, believed in people. He used to tease me about being too serious, too focused on building my empire." He paused, watching a squirrel dart between the headstones. "The night before he died, we had dinner. He told me he was thinking about proposing to his girlfriend when they got back from Europe. Asked if I thought he was crazy for wanting to get married so young." "What did you tell him?" "That he should wait. Build his career first. Make sure he could provide for a family." Darius's laugh was hollow. "I gave him the same lecture I'd been giving myself for years about how love was a luxury you earned after success." Maya reached out instinctively, covering his hand with hers. His fingers were cold despite the warm morning air. "He died thinking I disapproved of the thing that made him happiest," Darius said. "And I learned that all the money in the world can't buy you back a conversation you wish you'd handled differently." They sat in silence for several minutes, watching the cemetery gradually brighten as the sun climbed higher. Maya understood now why he came here, why he'd warned her not to fall in love with him. Grief had a way of building walls that felt like protection, but were really just prisons. "You know what I think?" Maya said finally. "What?" "I think Tyler would want you to be happy. Not perfect, not successful, not safe, Just happy. Darius looked at her then, really looked as if seeing her for the first time. When did you become so wise? Midnight art projects and too much coffee? She said lightly, earning a genuine smile. Plus, I have the advantage of being an outsider. Sometimes it takes fresh eyes to see what's been there all along. A jogger passed them on the path, earbuds in, focused on their own morning ritual. The normal world continuing its routine while Maya felt like something fundamental was shifting between her and the man beside her. Maya, Darius said, his thumb tracing across her knuckles where their hands were still joined. I need you to understand something. What? When I warned you not to fall in love with me, it wasn't arrogance. It was self-preservation. His eyes met hers, storm gray and completely vulnerable. Because I'm already halfway to falling in love with you, and that terrifies me more than any business deal I've ever negotiated. The confession hung in the humid air between them like Spanish moss, beautiful and fragile, and impossible to ignore. Maya stood, pulling him up with her. Then maybe, she said, it's time to stop running away from things that scare you. And as they walked back toward the cemetery entrance, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The third coincidence happened at Ellis Square's Saturday farmers market. Maya was examining heirloom tomatoes from a local farm stand, debating whether the deep purple Cherokee varieties were worth the premium price, when she spotted a familiar figure 3 booths down. Darius stood at the artisan coffee vendor, engaged in what appeared to be an intensely focused conversation about roasting techniques with a bearded man in overalls. She watched, fascinated, as this billionaire who commanded boardrooms asked genuinely curious questions about bean origins and brewing methods. There was something almost boyish in his enthusiasm, a glimpse of who he might have been before life taught him to armor his heart. The Ethiopian single origin has notes of blueberry and dark chocolate, the vendor was explaining. But if you want something that'll wake you up and keep you sharp for those morning meetings, the Guatemala Antigua is your best bet. I'll take a pound of each, Darius replied, then paused. Actually, make that 2 pounds of the Ethiopian. Maya found herself smiling. She'd mentioned loving blueberry notes in coffee during their bookstore conversation 3 days ago. It was a small detail, easily forgotten in the flow of conversation, but he'd remembered. She was still holding the Cherokee tomatoes when Darius appeared beside her, 2 steaming cups in hand. Fancy meeting you here, he said, offering her one of the cups. Ethiopian single origin. I thought you might want to try it. Are you stalking me? Darius Blackstone. Maya accepted the coffee, inhaling the rich aroma. In a city this size, either I'm stalking you, you're stalking me, or the universe has a sense of humor. He selected a perfect tomato from the display, examining it with the same attention he'd given the coffee beans. I'm betting on the universe. They walked together through the bustling market, past vendors selling everything from handmade soaps to locally sourced honey. The Saturday morning crowd was a mix of young families, elderly couples, and 20-somethings who looked like they'd rolled out of bed specifically for artisanal donuts. Can I ask you something? Maya said as they paused near a booth selling hand-woven baskets. Shoot. What do you actually do? I mean, I know you're in real estate and investments, but what does your typical day look like? Darius considered this as he sipped his coffee. Meetings, mostly. Phone calls to investors in New York and Los Angeles. Site visits to development projects. Contract reviews that would put most people to sleep. He gestured toward a young couple haggling playfully over the price of fresh peaches. Not exactly exciting stuff. But you love it? I used to. The admission came quietly. Now I'm not sure if I love it, or if I'm just good at it. Sometimes those things get confused. Maya stopped walking and turned to face him. What would you do if you could do anything? That's a dangerous question. I'm a dangerous woman, remember? Darius laughed, and the sound was lighter than anything she'd heard from him before. You really want to know? I really want to know. He leaned against a lamppost, watching a street musician tune his guitar nearby. I'd teach. Maybe high school business classes or community college entrepreneurship courses. Help kids who grew up like I did understand that they don't have to choose between being smart and being poor. The revelation hit Maya like a physical force. Here was a man worth hundreds of millions, and his secret dream was to make $30,000 a year helping teenagers. That's beautiful, she said simply. That's impractical, he corrected. I have responsibilities. Employees who depend on their jobs. Investors who trust me with their money. You don't just walk away from that because you have a midlife crisis about finding meaning. Says who? Says reality. Maya bought a small bouquet of sunflowers from an elderly woman whose weathered hands spoke of decades of gardening. As the vendor wrapped the stems in brown paper, Maya thought about the careful architecture of Darius's life, how every decision seemed designed to honor the dead rather than serve the living. "Can I tell you something?" Maya said as they found an empty bench near the fountain. "Fair's fair. I moved to Savannah because I was tired of being invisible." She arranged the sunflowers in her lap, their bright faces turned toward the morning sun. "In Chicago, I worked for a big design firm. Good salary, health insurance, the whole corporate package. But every project felt like painting someone else's vision. I was skilled, but I wasn't seen. What changed? My landlord raised my rent, and I realized I was paying Chicago prices to live a Chicago life I didn't even want." Maya smiled at the memory. "So I threw everything in my car, drove south until I found a place that felt like possibility, and started over. Any regrets?" "Only that I waited so long." She turned to study his profile. "What about you? Any regrets?" Darius was quiet for so long that Maya thought he might not answer. A family with 3 young children settled at the adjacent bench, the parents looking pleasantly exhausted while their kids shared a bag of kettle corn. "I regret that Tyler never got to meet you," he said finally. The words were so unexpected, so tender, that Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. "Why?" "Because he would have liked you, and he would have told me to stop being an idiot and ask you out properly instead of orchestrating these elaborate accidental meetings." Maya nearly choked on her coffee. "Orchestrated?" "The bookstore was genuine coincidence," Darius admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. "But I may have asked around about your morning routine after that. You've been planning these encounters?" "I prefer creating opportunities for natural conversation." Maya stared at him, torn between indignation and amusement. "That's either incredibly romantic or mildly stalkerish. I haven't decided which." "I was hoping for romantic." "It's," Maya considered, watching him fidget with his coffee cup like a nervous teenager. "It's sweet, actually, in a slightly unhinged billionaire way." "Is that a yes?" "A yes to what?" Darius set down his coffee and turned to face her fully. "Dinner. Tonight. Somewhere that doesn't require us to pretend we're meeting by accident." Maya looked at this man who'd built walls to protect his heart and was now dismantling them brick by brick, who'd remembered her coffee preferences and planned meetings around her schedule, who dreamed of teaching high school kids instead of conquering markets. "Yes," she said, "but I choose the place." "Deal." And as they sat in the morning sun, surrounded by the simple pleasures of a farmer's market, Maya realized she was no longer sure who was falling faster. At 7 p.m. sharp, Darius knocked on Maya's apartment door holding a single white magnolia. Maya opened the door to find him studying the faded paint on her building's exterior wall, with the focused attention of someone genuinely interested in architectural details. He wore dark jeans and a navy button-down, sleeves rolled up to reveal surprisingly strong forearms, a far cry from his usual tailored armor. "You actually came to my neighborhood," she said, accepting the magnolia and breathing in its sweet, lemony scent. "You said you wanted to choose the place." He gestured toward her modest apartment building in the Victorian district. "I assumed that meant starting here." Maya had deliberately chosen the most un-billionaire dinner spot she could think of, Zunzi's, a hole-in-the-wall sandwich shop where the walls were covered in customer graffiti and the plastic chairs had seen better decades. She wanted to see how Darius handled being completely out of his element. "Please tell me you're not allergic to adventure," she said, grabbing her purse and keys. "Define adventure." "Sandwiches that require architectural engineering to eat and sweet tea that could power a small city." Darius's smile was answer enough. The 15-minute walk to Zunzi's took them through Maya's adopted neighborhood, a collection of converted shotgun houses, tiny gardens bursting with native plants and front porches where neighbors actually knew each other's names. It was about as far from Darius's world of gated communities and private clubs as possible. "This is it," Maya announced as they reached the small storefront with its hand-painted sign and mismatched outdoor furniture. Darius paused, taking in the scene. A group of college students occupied 2 picnic tables, arguing loudly about football rankings while demolishing enormous sandwiches. An elderly man in paint-splattered overalls sat alone, methodically working through what appeared to be a sandwich the size of a small pillow. "No tablecloths," Darius observed. "No pretension either." Inside, the ordering process involved shouting over reggae music, while a cheerful woman with intricate braids explained the difference between Godfather and Conquistador sandwiches to first-time customers. Maya watched Darius study the handwritten menu board with the same intensity he'd probably applied to merger documents. "I'll have whatever she's having," he told the cashier, pointing at Maya. 2 Godfathers, extra sauce, sweet tea, Maya ordered, and we'll eat outside. They claimed a small table under string lights that had probably been hanging since the Clinton administration. Darius attempted to bite into his sandwich with characteristic precision, quickly discovering that Zunzi's creations required a more aggressive approach. There's a technique, Maya explained, demonstrating how to compress the sandwich before attacking. It's not about elegance. I'm gathering that. Darius followed her lead, managing to take a substantial bite without losing half the ingredients. His expression shifted from skeptical to surprised to genuinely pleased. This is not what you expected? Better than what I expected. He wiped sauce from his chin with a paper napkin. When was the last time you ate at a place like this? Maya nearly choked on her sweet tea. This is a place like this. I eat here at least twice a week. Right. Sorry. I meant, he gestured vaguely. Never mind. You meant when was the last time I ate somewhere expensive? I didn't mean to sound condescending. You didn't. You sounded sheltered. Maya's tone was gentle but direct. There's a difference. Darius set down his sandwich and really looked at her. Not the polite attention of their previous meetings, but the focused gaze of someone trying to solve a puzzle. You're not impressed by any of it, are you? He said. The money, the lifestyle, the access to whatever I want whenever I want it. Should I be? Most people are. I'm not most people. Maya leaned back in her plastic chair, watching a group of teenagers share a bag of chips at the next table. Don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-money. Financial security is important, but money is just a tool. It's what you build with it that matters. And what do you think I've built? The question carried weight, as if her answer might determine something important between them. Walls, Maya said honestly. Really expensive, really well-designed walls. Darius was quiet for a long moment, absently shredding his napkin into precise strips. Around them, Zunzi's buzzed with the easy energy of people enjoying simple pleasures. Good food, cold drinks, warm evening air. My father worked 3 jobs to keep our family in a 1-bedroom apartment in Cabrini Green, he said finally. He died of a heart attack when I was 16, probably from the stress of trying to provide for us on minimum wage and pride. Maya felt something shift in her chest. I'm sorry. After the funeral, I promised myself I'd never be that vulnerable again. Never let circumstances I couldn't control determine my family's fate. He looked up at her, his eyes reflecting the string lights above them. I've spent 20 years keeping that promise. At what cost? That's what I'm starting to wonder. A young couple at the adjacent table erupted in laughter over some private joke, their hands intertwined across the small surface. Maya watched Darius notice them, saw something flicker across his expression that looked like longing. Can I ask you something? Maya said. Seems to be the theme of our relationship. Relationship. The word hung in the humid air between them, acknowledged but not examined. When Tyler died, Maya continued carefully, did you stop believing in happiness, or did you decide you didn't deserve it? The question hit its mark. Darius's careful composure cracked just enough to let her glimpse the pain underneath. Maybe both, he admitted. Maya reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. His fingers were warm now, relaxed instead of tense. What if you're wrong? She said quietly. What if the best way to honor Tyler's memory isn't to build walls but to live the kind of life he would have wanted for you? Darius turned his hand palm up, intertwining their fingers. The gesture was small but felt monumental. A billionaire holding hands with a freelance designer at a sandwich shop. 2 people choosing connection over safety. Maya Sinclair, he said, you're definitely dangerous. Good dangerous or bad dangerous? The kind that changes everything. And as they sat under the string lights, sharing sweet tea and the comfortable silence of people who were beginning to understand each other, Maya realized she was no longer afraid of falling. Maya didn't expect to see Darius again for several days, but life had other plans. Monday morning found her at the Kroger on Abercorn Street, standing in the cereal aisle at 8 a.m., debating the nutritional merits of granola versus the comfort factor of Lucky Charms. Her freelance schedule meant grocery shopping during off-peak hours, when the store belonged to retirees, shift workers, and apparently billionaires buying coffee creamer. She spotted him before he saw her, standing at the dairy case with the focused intensity of someone who'd never bought his own groceries before. He held 2 different brands of half and half, reading ingredients like they contained state secrets. Heavy cream, Maya said, approaching from behind. If you're going to drink quality coffee, don't ruin it with processed additives. Darius turned, and his smile was immediate and unguarded. Are you following me now? I live 6 blocks from here. This is my grocery store. Maya gestured toward his cart, which contained the most bachelor-adjacent collection of items she'd ever seen. Frozen dinners, energy drinks, protein bars, and what appeared to be a single banana. That's either the saddest meal plan in Savannah or you're preparing for the apocalypse. I usually eat at the office, he said, sounding slightly defensive, or order takeout. When was the last time you cooked something? Darius considered this seriously. Does reheating count? No, it does not count. Maya abandoned her own cart and began adding items to his. Fresh spinach, eggs, real bread instead of the processed white loaf he'd selected. Bell peppers, onions, basic seasonings. This is an intervention. Maya, you don't have to. Scrambled eggs with vegetables. It's impossible to mess up. Takes 10 minutes, and won't slowly kill you like whatever you've been surviving on. She led him through the store like a tour guide, explaining the difference between cage-free and free-range eggs, why fresh herbs mattered, how to select produce that wouldn't immediately wilt in his refrigerator. Darius followed with the bemused attention of someone being inducted into a foreign culture. At the checkout line, behind a woman buying formula for twin babies and an elderly man carefully counting exact change for his coffee and newspaper, Maya realized how domestic this felt, how normal, like they were just another couple running errands together on a Monday morning. Can I ask you something? Darius said as they loaded bags into his BMW. You've been asking me things since we met. Why stop now? Why are you helping me learn to take care of myself instead of letting me take care of you? The question caught Maya off guard. She paused, a bag of groceries halfway to the trunk. What do you mean? Most women I've dated have been interested in what I could provide. Nice restaurants, expensive trips, access to experiences they couldn't afford on their own. Darius closed the trunk carefully. You keep showing me how to do things for myself. Maybe that's because I don't want to be taken care of, Maya said. I want to be chosen. There's a difference. They drove to Darius's house in comfortable silence, Maya giving directions through neighborhoods she'd only seen from the outside. When they pulled through the gates of his address, she understood immediately why he'd been so out of place at Zunzi's. The house was beautiful in the way that magazine spreads were beautiful. Perfect proportions, immaculate landscaping, every detail considered and expensive. It was also completely impersonal, like a luxury hotel that happened to have his mail delivered there. Welcome to the fishbowl, Darius said, noticing her expression as they walked toward the front door. Inside was worse. The kitchen looked like it had never been used for actual cooking. All granite countertops and professional appliances that probably cost more than Maya's annual rent. The refrigerator contained exactly what she'd expected. Takeout containers, energy drinks, and condiments that had likely come with the house. This is where you live? Maya asked, running her fingers along the pristine marble island. This is where I sleep and store my clothes, Darius corrected. I wouldn't call it living. Maya opened the grocery bags and began arranging ingredients on the counter. Okay, lesson 1. Cooking is about more than just food. It's about creating something with your hands, taking time to nurture yourself, being present in your own life. She talked him through beating eggs, explaining how to tell when the pan was the right temperature, when to add the vegetables, how to fold everything together without overcooking. Darius approached the task with the same methodical precision he probably brought to business deals, asking questions and following instructions with endearing seriousness. It smells like home, he said as the eggs began to set. What does home smell like to you? My mother's kitchen on Sunday mornings, before everything got complicated. He turned off the heat and divided the eggs between 2 plates. She used to make these elaborate brunches when Tyler and I were kids. Even when money was tight, she'd find ways to make Sunday feel special. They ate standing at the kitchen island, looking out through floor-to-ceiling windows at the manicured garden beyond. The scrambled eggs were simple but perfect, fluffy, flavorful, made with care and attention. This is good, Darius said, and she could hear genuine surprise in his voice. It's better because you made it yourself. No, it's better because you taught me how. He set down his fork and turned to face her fully. Maya, can I tell you something without you running away? That depends on what it is. I haven't felt this, myself, in years, maybe decades. His voice was quiet but steady. Since Tyler died, I've been going through the motions of living without actually experiencing any of it. Work, sleep, more work. Build the empire, honor the promise, keep everyone else safe. Maya felt her heart speed up. And now? Now I wake up looking forward to accidentally running into you. I find myself wondering what you'd think about business decisions I'm making, what you'd say about books I'm reading, whether you'd laugh at the ridiculous conversations I have in board meetings." He paused, searching her face. "You've made me remember what it feels like to be curious about my own life." The confession hung between them in the pristine kitchen, as real and imperfect as the simple meal they'd just shared. "Darius," Maya said carefully, "what are you asking me?" "I'm asking if you think there's room in your life for someone who's still learning how to live in his own." Maya looked at this man who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what the view looked like from the other side, who'd been surviving instead of thriving, who was now standing in his sterile kitchen, asking her to help him remember what home felt like. "There might be," she said finally, "but I have one condition." "Name it." "No more accidental meetings. If you want to see me, ask. If you want to spend time with me, say so. I'm not interested in being pursued like a business acquisition." Darius nodded slowly. "Maya Sinclair, would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow night? Not at Zunzi's, not anywhere public, just here. I'll cook." "You'll cook?" "I'll try to cook. You'll probably have to save us both from food poisoning." Maya smiled, and in that moment she realized she was no longer standing at the edge of falling. She was already in free fall, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of where she might land. Maya arrived at Darius's house Tuesday evening to find him standing in his driveway, staring at his phone with the expression of someone who just discovered fire. "Please tell me you didn't burn down your kitchen," she said, climbing out of her Honda. "Worse." He held up his phone, showing a text thread with someone named Harrison. "My assistant just informed me that the investors I've been courting for 6 months are flying in tomorrow morning for an impromptu site visit. Apparently they're concerned about some rumors regarding the downtown development project." Maya could see the familiar tension creeping back into his shoulders, the careful mask sliding into place. "What kind of rumors?" "The kind that could cost me everything I've spent the last decade building." Darius ran a hand through his hair. "I should cancel tonight. I need to prepare presentations, call my lawyers, figure out how to salvage this deal. Or," Maya said, walking toward his front door, "you could eat dinner first. Stress Management 101, you can't think clearly on an empty stomach." "Maya, you don't understand. I understand that panicking never solved a business crisis." She turned to face him in the doorway. "I also understand that you invited me to dinner and I'm hungry. So either we're going inside to cook together, or I'm going to Wendy's and you can stress-eat takeout while refreshing your email every 30 seconds. Darius stared at her for a moment, then something in his expression shifted. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Make everything seem manageable." Years of freelancing. Every project feels like life or death until you realize that tomorrow there will be a different project, and the world will keep spinning regardless. Inside, Maya discovered that Darius had actually attempted to prepare for their cooking lesson. The ingredients for chicken parmesan were laid out with military precision, along with a printed recipe he'd apparently downloaded and studied like a contract. "You researched dinner," she observed. "I wanted to impress you." "Darius." And Maya touched his arm, feeling the coiled tension beneath his expensive shirt. "You don't have to perform for me. I'm not here because you're successful or wealthy, or because you can execute a perfect meal. I'm here because yesterday you made scrambled eggs and told me you felt like yourself for the first time in years." Some of the tightness left his shoulders. "Right. Okay. Where do we start?" They worked side by side in his kitchen, Maya talking him through flattening chicken breasts while she prepared the breading station. The familiar rhythm of cooking, the methodical preparation, the satisfying progression from raw ingredients to finished dish, seemed to ground him in a way that board meetings and conference calls never could. "Tell me about the development project," Maya said as Darius carefully dredged chicken and flour. "It's a mixed-use complex in the downtown historic district. Residential units, retail space, office buildings. The kind of project that could revitalize the area or completely destroy its character, depending on how it's handled." "And which are you planning to do?" Darius paused, a piece of chicken halfway to the egg wash. "Honestly, I'm not sure anymore. When I started this project, it was about profit margins and market positioning. But after spending time in the actual neighborhoods affected," he trailed off, focusing intently on the breading process. But I keep thinking about the family that runs the corner grocery store, or the elderly woman who's lived in the same apartment for 40 years. The original plans would price them out entirely." Maya felt something shift in her understanding of him. "So change the plans. It's not that simple. I have investors who expect a certain return, contractors who've already been hired, city permits that took months to obtain. It's never simple, Maya agreed, heating oil in a large pan. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. They fell into comfortable silence as the chicken sizzled in the pan, and the scent of garlic and herbs filled the kitchen. Maya watched Darius monitor the pasta with the focused attention of someone who approached every task like it mattered, and she found herself wondering what other parts of his life he'd been sleepwalking through. "Can I ask you something?" she said, as they assembled the final dish. "Always. If Tyler were here right now, what would he tell you to do about the development project?" Darius's hands stilled over the mozzarella he'd been sprinkling on the chicken. "He'd probably ask me why I'm prioritizing investor profits over people's lives. And what would you tell him? That it's complicated, that business isn't charity, that I have responsibilities. And what would he say to that?" Darius smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. He'd probably say that the biggest responsibility we have is to each other, and that making money by hurting people isn't business. It's just sanctified greed. Maya slid the dish into the oven and set the timer. He sounds like he was wise. He was 22 and thought he could save the world with good intentions and a college degree. Darius leaned against the counter, watching her rinse dishes in the sink. But maybe that's not such a bad way to see things. They ate at his dining room table, which Maya suspected hadn't been used since he'd moved in. The chicken parmesan was imperfect, slightly overcooked in places, underseasoned in others, but it tasted like effort and care and the beginning of something that might be called home. "This is good," Darius said, and Maya could tell he was surprised again. "It's good because we made it together. Everything is better when we do it together." The words slipped out before he could stop them, and Maya felt her breath catch. There was something in his voice, a vulnerability that went beyond the evening's cooking lesson or even the business crisis looming over tomorrow. "Darius," she said carefully, "I know. Too much. Too fast. I'm supposed to play it cool, take things slow, not scare you away with the intensity of whatever this is. What if I don't want you to play it cool?" He looked up from his plate, hope and caution warring in his expression. "What if I told you that sitting here with you, eating imperfect chicken parmesan in my dining room, feels more real than anything I've experienced in 10 years? What if I told you I know exactly what you mean?" The timer on his phone buzzed, a reminder about the morning's investor meeting, the crisis that needed managing, the empire that required his attention. Darius glanced at it, then deliberately turned the phone face down on the table. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand, "I want you to know that tonight has been perfect." Maya intertwined their fingers, feeling the calluses from his morning runs, the warmth of his palm against hers. "Even with the business crisis?" "Especially with the business crisis, because for the first time in my adult life, I have something that matters more than work." And as they sat in the soft light of his dining room, Maya realized that somewhere between teaching him to scramble eggs and watching him worry about displacing families, she had fallen completely, irreversibly in love with Darius Blackstone. Maya's phone rang at 6:47 a.m., jolting her awake in her small apartment. "I need to see you." Darius's voice was strained, exhausted. "Can you meet me at Forsyth Park, the main fountain?" "What happened?" Maya sat up, immediately alert. "The investor meeting? Can you come, please?" 20 minutes later, Maya found him sitting on a bench facing the iconic fountain, still wearing yesterday's shirt and looking like he hadn't slept. The early morning joggers created a steady stream of movement around them, but Darius sat motionless, staring at the water cascading in endless circles. "Tell me," she said, settling beside him. The meeting was a setup. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Harrison tipped off the investors about my concerns regarding the project. They came prepared with lawyers and exit clauses." Maya felt ice form in her stomach. "What kind of concerns?" "Apparently, asking questions about the impact on existing residents makes me an unreliable business partner." Darius finally looked at her, and she could see the exhaustion in his storm-gray eyes. "They gave me an ultimatum. Proceed with the original development plans or they pull their funding and sue me for breach of contract." "How much money?" "Enough to destroy everything I've built. The company, the employees who depend on me, the other projects that are keeping families employed." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I'd lose it all." Maya watched a young mother push her toddler on the nearby swings, the child's delighted laughter carrying across the morning air. Normal life continuing while Darius's world crumbled around them. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." The admission came out broken. "For 10 years every decision has been clear. Build wealth, create security, Honor the promise I made to myself after my father died, but now I keep thinking about Tyler and what he'd say about choosing money over people. I keep thinking about Mrs. Chen, who's run that corner market for 30 years and won't be able to afford the new rent. I keep thinking about you, and how you look at me like I'm someone worth knowing instead of someone worth using. Maya took his hand, finding it cold despite the warm morning air. Darius, what do you want to do? I want to tell the investors to go to hell. I want to redesign the project so it actually serves the community instead of gentrifying it out of existence. I want to build something Tyler would be proud of instead of something that just makes money. Then do that. You don't understand. Darius pulled his hand free, standing abruptly and pacing to the fountain's edge. It's not just my money at risk. I have 43 employees who depend on their jobs to feed their families. I have other investors in different projects who trust me to be financially responsible. If I tank this deal on principle, the ripple effects could destroy dozens of other people's livelihoods. Maya joined him at the fountain, watching the water catch the early sunlight. What if there's a third option? Such as? What if you find different investors? People who care about community development instead of just profit margins. Darius laughed, but there was no humor in it. Those investors don't exist at this scale. Community-minded capital is a myth. Is it? Or have you just never looked for it because you assumed it wasn't there? Before Darius could answer, his phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it, and Maya watched his expression shift from exhaustion to resignation. Harrison, he said, the investors want an answer by 5 p.m. today. They walked back toward the street in heavy silence, the weight of impossible choices settling between them like a third presence. Maya wanted to fix this for him, to wave a magic wand and make the solution obvious, but she was beginning to understand that some problems didn't have clean answers. Maya, Darius said as they reached her car, whatever I decide, I need you to know something. What? Meeting you didn't complicate my life. It clarified it. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs tracing her cheekbones. For the first time in a decade, I know what actually matters. And it's not the money or the empire or even the promise I made to my teenage self. What is it? It's this. It's you. It's the possibility of building a life that serves something bigger than fear. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. Then fight for it. Fight for the project you actually believe in, for the community that needs protecting, for the version of yourself that Tyler would recognize. Even if it costs me everything? What if losing everything you thought you wanted is the only way to find what you actually need? Darius kissed her then, soft and desperate and full of unspoken promises. When they separated, Maya could see something different in his expression. Not the resignation of defeat, but the quiet determination of someone who'd finally decided what he was willing to fight for. I have to go, he said. I have some calls to make. What kind of calls? The kind that might save my soul or ruin my credit rating. Possibly both. Maya watched him drive away, his BMW disappearing into the morning traffic that was beginning to thicken as Savannah woke up around them. She stood beside her car for several minutes, watching joggers and dog walkers and people heading to jobs that probably didn't require them to choose between financial security and moral integrity. Her phone buzzed with a text from her biggest client, asking about timeline adjustments for their fall campaign. Normal work, normal deadlines, normal problems that had clear solutions and predictable outcomes. Maya stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Can we discuss this afternoon?" Something important came up, because sometimes, she realized, the most important thing you could do was be available when someone you loved decided to change their entire life. And Maya Sinclair was beginning to understand that she loved Darius Blackstone enough to stand beside him while he figured out who he wanted to become. Maya spent the entire day unable to concentrate on anything except her phone. She sat in her small studio apartment, laptop open to a half-finished logo design, but her eyes kept drifting to the silent device on her coffee table. Every hour that passed without word from Darius felt like a small eternity. By 3 p.m., she'd reorganized her entire workspace twice and deep-cleaned her already spotless kitchen. At 4:23 p.m., her phone finally rang. Maya. Darius's voice was different, lighter somehow. Despite the exhaustion, she could still hear underneath. Can you meet me somewhere? Of course. Where? The corner of Bull and Gaston. There's someone I want you to meet. 20 minutes later, Maya found herself standing outside a modest storefront with faded awnings and hand-painted signs in both English and Mandarin. Through the window, she could see Darius sitting at a small table with an elderly Asian woman, deep in animated conversation over steaming cups of tea. The bell above the door chimed as Maya entered, and both heads turned toward her. The woman was perhaps 70, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that held the kind of wisdom that came from decades of watching neighborhoods change around her. "Maya, this is Mrs. Lila Chen," Darius said, standing as she approached. "Mrs. Chen, this is Maya Sinclair, the woman I was telling you about." Mrs. Chen studied Maya with frank curiosity, then smiled. "Ah, the one who teaches you to cook." "Among other things," Maya said, accepting the chair Darius pulled out for her. "Mrs. Chen has been telling me about this neighborhood," Darius continued, settling back into his seat. "How it's changed over the past 30 years, what the families here actually need, what would help versus what would hurt." Maya looked around the small market, taking in the carefully organized shelves of imported goods, the handwritten price tags, the photos of family members taped to the register. This wasn't just a business, it was a community hub, a piece of cultural preservation in a rapidly gentrifying city. "And I've been telling this stubborn boy that money isn't everything," Mrs. Chen said, refilling Darius's teacup with practiced efficiency, though he's beginning to learn. "What happened with the investors?" Maya asked. Darius and Mrs. Chen exchanged a look that spoke of hours of conversation and mutual understanding. "I told them no," Darius said simply. "I terminated the partnership and forfeited my development rights to the property." Maya felt her heart stop. "All of it? All of it? The investors, the funding, the project as originally conceived." He reached across the table to take her hand. "Everything I spent 2 years building. And?" Maya's voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "And I spent the day talking to people like Mrs. Chen, business owners, longtime residents, community leaders who actually live in the neighborhoods that would be affected." Darius's eyes were brighter than she'd seen them since they'd met. "Do you want to know what I discovered?" Mrs. Chen answered before Maya could respond. "He discovered that there are more important things than profit margins. I discovered that there's a difference between development and destruction," Darius corrected gently, "and that maybe, just maybe, I can build something better." Maya looked between them, trying to understand. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm starting over. Smaller scale, community-focused, with investors who care about sustainable development rather than maximum returns." Darius squeezed her hand. "It'll take longer, make less money, and probably give me gray hair before I'm 40. But it'll be something Tyler would be proud of. And something you can be proud of," Mrs. Chen added. "That matters more than people realize." Maya felt tears gathering in her eyes. "What about your employees? The other projects? Most of them are staying with me. Turns out a lot of people in this business are tired of building things that serve money instead of communities." Darius smiled, and it was the first completely unguarded expression she'd ever seen from him. "We're going to be smaller, more focused, but we're going to build things that last." Mrs. Chen stood, gathering the tea service with efficient movements. "I'll leave you two alone. But Maya," she paused, looking directly at her, "you should know that this man has been talking about you for the past 4 hours. Apparently, you helped him remember what he actually wanted to do with his life." As Mrs. Chen disappeared into the back of the store, Maya found herself alone with Darius in the quiet afternoon light filtering through the storefront windows. "You gave up everything," she said. "I gave up everything that was keeping me from living," he corrected. "There's a difference. Aren't you terrified?" "Absolutely," Darius laughed, running his free hand through his hair. "I'm terrified that I'll fail, that I'll let down the people who are trusting me with this new direction, that I'll discover I don't actually know how to build something meaningful. And I'm more terrified of the person I was becoming if I didn't change course." He turned in his chair to face her fully. "Maya, I need to tell you something." "What?" "This morning, when I was sitting in that conference room listening to men in expensive suits explain why profit mattered more than people, I kept thinking about what you said about Tyler, about living the kind of life he would have wanted for me." Maya waited, sensing something important building in the space between them. "I realized that Tyler wouldn't just want me to be happy. He'd want me to be brave enough to choose happiness over security, to choose love over fear." Darius's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "To choose you over everything else that doesn't actually matter." "Darius, I love you, Maya Sinclair." The words came out steady and sure, despite the nervous energy she could see in his hands. "I love your courage and your kindness and the way you see possibilities where other people see problems. I love that you taught me to cook and shop for groceries and remember what it feels like to be curious about my own life." Maya felt her world tilt on its axis, everything realigning around this moment, this man, This choice that felt inevitable and terrifying and absolutely right. "I love you too," she said, and watched relief and joy wash over his features like sunrise. "Even though I just became a significantly less wealthy man, especially because you just became a significantly braver one." And as Darius leaned across the small table to kiss her, Maya realized that sometimes the most important revolutions began not with grand gestures, but with the quiet decision to choose love over fear, community over profit, and the possibility of building something beautiful over the security of keeping what you already had. 2 weeks later, the August heat had given way to the first whisper of autumn, and Savannah was preparing for its most elegant social event of the season. Maya stood in the bathroom of her small apartment, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The burgundy dress she'd splurged on for tonight's charity gala made her feel like someone she was still learning to become. Confident, worthy of standing beside a man who'd just restructured his entire life around his values instead of his bank account. Her phone buzzed with a text from Darius. "Car will be there in 10 minutes. You look beautiful." She smiled, typing back, "How do you know how I look? You're not even here, because you always look beautiful. But tonight you're going to outshine every star in Georgia." Maya felt warmth spread through her chest. 2 weeks of stolen dinners, morning runs through Forsyth Park, and late-night conversations about everything from neighborhood development to favorite childhood books had only deepened what was growing between them. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like a beginning. The Mercer mansion looked exactly as it had a month ago when Maya had first walked through its doors as a nervous freelance designer. Same golden light spilling from the windows, same elegant crowd murmuring on the terraces, same sense of history weighing down every carefully appointed room. But everything else had changed. Maya arrived on Darius's arm, no longer the invisible contractor, but his invited guest, his chosen partner, the woman he introduced to business associates and old friends with quiet pride in his voice. She watched him navigate conversations about his new direction, saw how people's expressions shifted from confusion to respect as he explained his community-focused approach to development. "You're different," observed Caroline Westbrook, the mayor's wife, during a conversation near the dessert table. "Both of you. There's something," she gestured vaguely, "more substantial." "Maya makes me want to be the person I always should have been," Darius replied simply, his hand finding the small of Maya's back. As the evening progressed, Maya found herself watching Darius with growing amazement. This was the man who'd warned her not to fall in love with him, who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what the view looked like from the other side. Now he moved through the crowd with easy confidence, discussing affordable housing initiatives and community partnerships with the same passion he'd once reserved for profit margins. Near midnight, as the crowd began to thin and the evening wound toward its close, Darius took Maya's hand and led her away from the main ballroom. "Where are we going?" she asked, following him through familiar corridors. "Somewhere we can be alone." They emerged onto the same garden terrace where they'd first met, where he'd given her that impossible warning that had started everything. Spanish moss, draped from ancient oaks like nature's chandeliers, and the warm night air carried the perfume of late summer magnolias. Maya leaned against the wrought iron railing, looking out over gardens that seemed to glow in the moonlight. Behind them, the soft sound of jazz music drifted from the ballroom, but here they were wrapped in comfortable solitude. "Maya," Darius said, and something in his voice made her turn to face him. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking suddenly uncertain despite the confidence he'd displayed all evening. The man who'd just spent hours discussing million-dollar development projects now looked nervous about whatever he wanted to say next. "A month ago I stood in this exact spot and told you not to fall in love with me," he began. "I remember. I was trying to protect you from someone who didn't know how to love anything except success and security. Someone who'd forgotten that the point of building walls isn't to stay safe forever. It's to buy yourself time to figure out what's worth protecting." Maya felt her heart begin to race, sensing something monumental building in the space between them. "I thought I was warning you away from a man who'd lost his capacity for joy, for spontaneity, for putting another person's happiness before his own calculated interests." Darius took a step closer. "But what I was really doing was warning you away from a man who was terrified of discovering that he was still capable of feeling everything he'd convinced himself was too dangerous to want. And now," Maya's voice was barely above a whisper, "now I know that the most dangerous thing isn't falling in love. It's spending your life avoiding it." He reached into his jacket pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box that caught the moonlight. "Maya, I don't want to warn you away from loving me. I want to spend the rest of my life earning the privilege of loving you back." Maya's hands flew to her mouth as Darius dropped to one knee on the ancient stones of the terrace, opening the box to reveal a ring that was somehow both elegant and understated, exactly what she would have chosen if she'd dared to dream. "Maya Sinclair," he said, looking up at her with eyes that held no walls, no careful calculations, nothing but absolute certainty. "Will you marry me?" The question hung in the humid air between them, surrounded by Spanish moss and moonlight and the distant sound of music that seemed to be playing just for them. Maya looked down at this man who'd rebuilt his entire life around love instead of fear, who'd chosen community over profit and courage over security, who'd taught himself to cook scrambled eggs and learn to shop for groceries, and remembered what it felt like to be curious about his own future. "Yes," she said, and the word came out like laughter and tears and absolute joy all mixed together. "Yes, yes, of course, yes," as Darius slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, because apparently he'd been paying attention to everything, even the size of her hands. Maya realized that sometimes the most beautiful love stories began with warnings. "Don't fall in love with me," he'd said, but what he'd really been saying was, "Please be patient while I remember how to be worth loving." And as he stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her under the Spanish moss with all the passion of a man who'd finally stopped running from his own heart, Maya whispered against his lips the words that changed everything. Darius. Just his name, spoken with all the love and certainty and promise of forever that a single word could hold. And in that moment, surrounded by the gardens where it all began, Maya Sinclair and Darius Blackstone discovered that the most powerful magic in the world wasn't avoiding love. It was finally, completely, courageously surrendering to it. 6 months later, the morning light filtered through the kitchen windows of the house they'd bought together in Ardsley Park, catching the steam rising from 2 coffee cups and the newspaper spread across the wooden table that had seen 1,000 shared breakfasts. Maya Blackstone, she still smiled every time she wrote her new name, sat cross-legged in one of the mismatched chairs they'd found at an estate sale, reading aloud from the Savannah Morning News while Darius stood at the stove, expertly flipping what had become his signature Saturday morning pancakes. "Listen to this," Maya said, folding the paper to highlight a particular article. Local developer Darius Blackstone announced the groundbreaking of Savannah's first truly affordable mixed-use community, designed in partnership with neighborhood residents and funded through a coalition of socially responsible investors. "You don't have to read my own press to me," Darius interrupted, but she could hear the pleasure in his voice. "I'm reading it because I'm proud of you." Maya set down the paper and moved to stand behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "And because Mrs. Chen is quoted saying that you're the only developer in Savannah who listens more than he talks." Darius leaned back against her, comfortable in a way that still amazed Maya after 6 months of marriage. The man who'd once held himself apart from everything now sought out physical connection like he was making up for decades of emotional distance. "Speaking of Mrs. Chen," he said, sliding perfectly golden pancakes onto a plate, "she wants to know if we're coming to her grandson's graduation party next weekend." "Of course we are. I already bought the gift." Maya reached around him to steal a piece of bacon from the serving plate. College graduation business degree she's so proud she could burst. They ate breakfast on their back porch, surrounded by the garden Maya had been slowly coaxing into existence. Nothing fancy or formal, just herbs for cooking, vegetables for their table, and flowers because life needed beauty as much as function. "What's on your agenda today?" Darius asked, refilling her coffee cup from the French press they'd received as a wedding gift. 3 client consultations, 2 logo revisions, and a meeting with that nonprofit about their fundraising materials. Maya tucked her feet under her in the wicker chair. "What about you?" "Site visit to the construction project, lunch with the community advisory board, and then I promised Tyler's girlfriend I'd help her move into her new apartment." Maya looked up from her pancakes. "Tyler's girlfriend?" "Ex-girlfriend, technically. Naomi." Darius smiled, but there was something bittersweet in his expression. "She reached out a few months ago. Turns out she's been living in Savannah this whole time, working as a social worker. We've been talking. About Tyler, about grief, about how to honor people we've lost without letting their absence define everything we do moving forward." Darius reached across the small table to take Maya's hand. "She said something interesting last week." "What?" "She said Tyler would have liked you, that he would have been happy to see me with someone who challenged me to be better instead of just successful." Maya felt familiar tears prick at her eyes. Even 6 months later, conversations about Tyler could still catch her off guard with their emotional intensity. "I wish I could have met him," she said. "You would have loved him, and he would have loved watching me try to impress you by learning to cook." Darius laughed, squeezing her hand. "He always said I was too serious about everything except the things that actually mattered." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled with the sounds of their neighborhood waking up around them. Children riding bikes, dogs barking, the distant hum of weekend lawnmowers. "Maya," Darius said eventually. Do you ever miss it? Your old life before everything got complicated with me?" Maya considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, she'd been a single freelancer living in a studio apartment, eating dinner alone most nights, building other people's dreams instead of her own. Safe, independent, invisible. "I miss the simplicity sometimes," she said honestly, "but I don't miss the loneliness. And I definitely don't miss the person I was before I learned it was possible to love someone completely without losing myself in the process. Even when I'm difficult, especially when you're difficult, it means you still care enough to fight for things that matter to you." Darius stood, gathering their empty plates with the automatic efficiency of someone who'd learned to find joy in domestic routines. "What do you want to do tomorrow?" "Tomorrow's Sunday. Farmer's market, afternoon at the beach, dinner with whatever we find that looks good." Maya followed him inside, already anticipating the comfortable rhythm of their shared weekend. "Why?" "No reason. I just like having plans with you. Things to look forward to." As they moved through their kitchen, washing dishes and putting away breakfast ingredients with the comfortable choreography of two people who'd learned to share space seamlessly, Maya caught sight of their reflection in the window. Darius in worn jeans and a faded Georgia Bulldogs t-shirt, hair still messy from sleep. Maya in cotton pajamas and one of his button-down shirts, no makeup, completely at ease. They looked like exactly what they were, two people who'd found their way to each other through all the complicated geography of fear and love, and the courage to choose connection over safety. "Darius," Maya said, as he hung up the dish towel. "Yes? I love you." He turned to face her, and his smile was the same one she'd fallen in love with in a bookstore, at a farmer's market, across a kitchen island while learning to make scrambled eggs. Completely unguarded, entirely present, absolutely sure. "I love you too, Maya Blackstone." And as they stood in their kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of a life they'd built together from scratch, Maya realized that the most beautiful thing about their love story wasn't how it began with warnings and walls and the fear of feeling too much. The most beautiful thing was how it continued, day after ordinary day, with the quiet choice to keep choosing each other, to keep building something worth protecting, to keep saying each other's names like prayers answered and promises kept. Outside, Savannah went about its Saturday morning business. Tourists taking photos, locals running errands, the eternal rhythm of a city that had seen countless love stories unfold within its historic embrace. But inside their kitchen, time moved differently, slower, sweeter, marked not by clocks or calendars but by coffee shared and dishes washed, and the simple miracle of two people who'd learned to make a home out of the space between their heartbeats. Sometimes, Maya thought as Darius pulled her close for a kiss that tasted like maple syrup and possibility, the greatest adventures begin when you finally stop running from love and start running toward it. And in that moment, surrounded by morning light and the promise of all their tomorrows, Maya Sinclair Blackstone knew that she'd never want to run anywhere else. A question for you, dear viewers. Have you ever had to choose between what felt safe and what felt right? What did that choice teach you about the kind of life you really wanted to build? Your participation in this channel is very important. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.